Welcome to the deep dive. You know, I love when you send over stuff like this, and this report on mirror bacteria is no exception. Let me tell you, it was a fascinating read. And we're going to try to break down the key findings and the implications for you today, but in a way that, well, respects your time, of course.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, so to start, what are mirror bacteria? Imagine looking in a mirror.
Oh, yeah.
And you see yourself, except every molecule is flipped.
It's wild, right?
Yeah, it's like a parallel universe of life where everything's reversed. And these mirror bacteria can't actually occur naturally, right?
No, I mean, not as far as we know.
Yeah.
But the real thing is that they could be created.
In a lab.
In a lab, exactly.
That's pretty wild. So the report suggests that creating the first mirror bacterium would be incredibly difficult.
It would be a huge undertaking.
Like building a house of cards in the hurricane.
Yeah, pretty much. Like a monumental task.
But once that blueprint exists, engineering existing bacteria to become mirror versions would be significantly easier.
Oh, yeah, much easier. Think of it like baking a cake, You have a recipe.
Oh, yeah.
It's much easier to tweak the recipe than to come up with it from scratch.
That's a really good analogy, and
Yeah.
that's exciting because scientists have already started synthesizing mirror versions of enzymes,
Oh, yeah.
like DNA polymerase and RNA polymerase.
Those are big ones.
Huge, right? Those are like fundamental tools of life, right?
The bedrock of biology, really.
How do they actually go about creating a whole mirror bacterium, though? It sounds like so complex, like something out of science fiction.
The report outlines two main approaches, the bottom-up approach
Okay,
and the top-down approach.
got it.
So the bottom-up approach is really ambitious. You're essentially building a mirror bacterium from scratch, atom by atom, starting with synthesizing a mirror genome.
Whoa.
That's the bacteria's entire genetic code, and then you'd have to build everything else from there. Mirror ribosomes, which are like the tiny factories in cells that build proteins.
Oh, wow, yeah.
It's like a molecular Lego set, but everything's reversed.
That sounds incredibly complex.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it would involve not only creating all those pieces, but figuring out how to assemble them into a functioning organism.
So the report does mention promising research on synthetic cells.
That's right.
Does that help?
It does. Scientists are making headway in creating artificial cells, essentially encapsulating DNA and protein-making systems within tiny little bubbles, which could express genes and even produce proteins. It's pretty incredible. And that research,
Yeah.
is a stepping stone towards potentially creating mirror organisms.
Okay, so that's the bottom-up approach. And what about top-down? What is that?
The top-down approach involves taking an existing bacterium
Okay.
and transforming it into its mirror image. You're essentially taking a car
Yeah.
and flipping all its parts, like the engine to the steering wheel. One idea is to potentially replace the bacterium's genetic code, codon by codon, with a mirror version.
Yeah.
Again, that's a super complex task.
Oh, yeah, like rewiring an entire electrical system while it's still on.
Yeah, exactly. And you would also need to mirror the cellular machinery itself. You'd have to figure out how to engineer ribosomes and all these other essential components to work with mirror amino acids.
Those are the building blocks of mirror proteins.
Exactly.
So creating mirror bacteria, while a fascinating prospect, is still a massive undertaking. And the report doesn't just talk about how, it also delves into the potential risks. And this is where things get a little concerning.
A little bit. I mean, the report emphasizes that mirror bacteria could pose significant threats, not just to humans, but to animals,
Really?
plants,
Wow.
even to the environment as a whole.
Yeah.
Even an accidental release could have some crazy far-reaching consequences.
And I don't know if you saw this, but the U.S. National Science Foundation
Yeah,
is funding research toward creating mirror cells.
I did see that. That's pretty wild, right?
Yeah, so that's happening. And the report actually goes even further and suggests the possibility of mirror bacteria being misused as biological weapons.
Oh, that's not good.
That's really a scary thought, right?
For sure.
But let's just go back to the science for a second. Why are mirror bacteria considered so dangerous? How would our immune systems even handle something so fundamentally different?
That's a good question. Our immune systems are pretty complex, but they rely on recognizing specific molecules to identify and fight off invaders. With mirror bacteria, it's like trying to fit a left-handed glove on your right hand. It just doesn't work.
So our immune system is essentially blind to these mirror invaders.
Pretty much. Antibacterial enzymes, which normally break down harmful bacteria, wouldn't be able to bind to mirror molecules because they can't recognize those shapes.
So even phagocytosis, the process where immune cells engulf and destroy bacteria, would be compromised.
Exactly. The receptors on those cells wouldn't recognize the mirrored molecules.
So even our first line of defense would struggle against these mirror microbes. What about our adaptive immunity, the system that learns and remembers specific threats? Would that work?
Unfortunately, probably not. The report suggests that adaptive immunity, while a powerful system, would also face significant hurdles. T cells, which are crucial for targeting and destroying infected cells, they rely on recognizing specific peptides. But with mirror bacteria, this recognition wouldn't happen efficiently because the shapes just don't match up.
So not only would our initial defenses be weakened,
Right.
but our more specialized defenses wouldn't be as effective either.
Wouldn't be as effective, yeah.
So the report actually suggests that even antibody production, which is a key part of our immune response,
A key part, yeah.
would be diminished because mirror proteins are resistant to the usual breakdown processes, so it makes it harder for our bodies to generate effective antibodies.
Yes.
It's like our immune system's trying to fight a shadow.
Yeah.
It just can't get a grip. And the report doesn't sugarcoat the potential consequences. It mentions the risk of mirror bacteria reaching the bloodstream and causing lethal systemic infections similar to sepsis.
Oh, yeah.
Sepsis is a terrifying condition. It's where the body's response to infection spirals out of control, damaging its own tissues and organs. So imagine our own immune system turning against us
That's scary.
and unable to distinguish friend from foe.
Yeah, that's a scary thought.
It does paint a pretty grim picture, but surely there are ways to counter these mirror bacteria, right? I mean, science must have some answers.
The report does explore potential countermeasures, but it's not a straightforward solution. It mentions things like PPC, hand washing, and sterilization,
Okay.
which are generally insensitive to chirality,
Yeah.
but those are just basic preventative measures. They might not be enough to fully contain mirror bacteria.
So the basics still apply, but we need more specialized tools
Yeah.
to actually combat these mirror microbes, right?
Yes, absolutely. And one of the main challenges is that mirror bacteria's unique properties would require very specialized facilities and expertise to study them safely, which could really slow down the research and development of any countermeasures.
Makes sense. And traditional antibiotics wouldn't work on mirror bacteria.
No, because they target specific molecules in regular bacteria.
Yeah.
So we need to develop entirely new antibiotics,
Bro.
specifically designed to target mirror bacteria, which is a huge undertaking.
And what about vaccines? Could we train our immune system to recognize these mirrored foes?
Vaccines are a promising avenue, and the report specifically mentions conjugate vaccines. These work by attaching a recognizable molecule to a part of the mirror bacteria, which can help our immune system target them. It's like putting a beacon on the mirror bacteria to make them visible to our defenses.
That's a really great way to think about it.
Thanks.
But perhaps the most fascinating idea is using mirror phages
Oh, yeah.
as a countermeasure. What are those?
Phages are viruses that infect and kill bacteria, and mirror phages would be phages with reverse chirality, basically. You're fighting fire with fire on a microscopic scale.
Okay, now that does sound cool.
It is cool.
But wouldn't there be a risk of those mirror phages spreading and being hard to control as well?
That's a valid concern. It would be a constant balancing act, weighing the potential benefits against the inherent risks of using mirror phages to combat mirror bacteria.
So it seems like there are a lot of challenges in terms of controlling these mirror bacteria.
For sure. It's a multifaceted problem.
Let's talk about the environmental impact of mirror bacteria. Could they survive in, say, soil or water?
The report suggests that it's definitely possible, and that's a scary thought, because if they could survive there, they could spread.
Yeah, like through animals or even human activity.
Exactly.
It's a chilling thought. And they could even potentially outcompete natural bacteria because many of the predators that keep bacteria in check wouldn't recognize these mirror versions.
Oh, yeah, it's like giving them an invisibility cloak in the microbial world. Yeah.
Exactly. So what would the ecological impact be if these mirror organisms started dominating ecosystems?
The report outlines some alarming possibilities. Everything from the extinction of susceptible plants and animal populations to disruptions of nutrient cycles.
So this deep dive is getting deeper by the minute. But if mirror bacteria did spread in the environment, how could we even control them? It's like trying to contain something invisible.
It is. It's like trying to put the genie back in the bottle. The report mentions some potential control measures like modifying the environment to make it less hospitable
Okay.
or introducing competing natural bacteria,
Yeah.
even deploying those mirror phages we discussed earlier.
So it sounds like a battle on multiple fronts, and there are no easy answers. We've covered a lot of ground already. The complexities of creating mirror bacteria to the potential risks they pose to humans and the environment, and even explored some possible countermeasures. What are your thoughts so far?
I think it's a really fascinating and thought-provoking report, and it really highlights the potential challenges and opportunities that come with exploring the frontiers of science.
Yeah, it's definitely food for thought, and we'll be diving deeper into those specific challenges and opportunities in the next part of our deep dive. Stay tuned.
Yeah, it's a mind-boggling concept, isn't it? I mean, the sheer scale of the potential threat
Yeah.
is what really strikes me. We're talking about something that operates outside the rules of life as we know it.
The report really drives that point home that this isn't just some theoretical threat.
No, not at all.
This is something that could become a reality.
Yeah, in the not-so-distant future.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about how our immune systems, which are usually pretty good at recognizing threats,
Right.
would struggle to combat mirror bacteria. What are some of the key challenges that our defenses would face?
So imagine our immune system as this complex lock and key mechanism, right?
Okay.
It relies on recognizing specific shapes and patterns to identify and neutralize invaders.
Yeah.
But with mirror bacteria,
Mm-hmm.
it's like trying to fit the wrong key into the lock.
Oh, yeah.
The shapes just don't match up.
So our usual defenses would be rendered ineffective.
In many ways, yeah. Like antibacterial enzymes, they're like our body's specialized weapons for breaking down harmful bacteria.
Yeah.
They wouldn't be able to bind to mirror molecules
Why not?
because they're designed to target specific shapes.
Oh.
And when those shapes are flipped, it's
Yeah.
like they're useless.
So even phagocytosis, where immune cells engulf and destroy bacteria,
Right.
would be compromised.
Most likely, yeah. Because the receptors on those cells just wouldn't be able to grasp onto these mirrored molecules.
So even our first line of defense would be struggling to keep up.
Yeah. And what's even more concerning is that adaptive immunity, which is our body's more sophisticated defense system, would also face some serious challenges.
Adaptive immunity is like our body's memory bank, right?
Yeah. Is it?
It learns from past infections and develops these targeted defenses.
Right.
Would that not provide some level of protection?
Well, it does, but the problem is that adaptive immunity
Yeah.
also relies on recognizing
Oh.
specific shapes and patterns, right?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So like T cells, which are crucial for targeting and destroying infected cells,
Uh-huh.
they depend on recognizing specific peptides.
Yeah.
But with mirror bacteria, those peptides would be flipped, so they'd be unrecognizable to our T cells.
So it's like our T cells are trying to read a book
Yeah,
written in a language they don't understand.
that's a good way to put it.
And even B cells, which produce antibodies
Uh-huh.
that tag invaders for destruction,
Yeah.
they would also struggle to generate effective antibodies
That was likely.
against mirror proteins
Yeah.
because they can't recognize them.
Exactly.
So essentially, our immune system would be fighting with one hand tied behind its back
Pretty much, yeah.
against these mirror invaders.
Yeah, it would be at a significant disadvantage.
And the report doesn't hold back on the consequences. It even mentions the risk of lethal systemic infections like sepsis.
Sepsis is really scary.
Oh, yeah, it's terrifying.
It's like the body's alarm system going haywire
Yeah.
and leading to all this widespread inflammation and organ failure. It's really bad.
I'm trying to wrap my head around how that would even work, though,
Yeah.
with mirror bacteria. Would our immune system even recognize these mirrored molecules as threats?
That's a great question. And the report explores a few different possibilities.
Okay.
One is that even if our immune system doesn't fully recognize the mirror bacteria, it might still overreact, leading to an uncontrolled inflammatory response.
So it's like our body's trying to fight something it can't even see, swinging wildly in the dark.
Yeah, a good analogy. And there's another scenario, too,
Okay.
that the report outlines, and this one suggests that even without direct recognition, mirror bacteria could still trigger sepsis through a different mechanism.
What's that?
It's called damage-associated molecular patterns, or DAMPs.
Dams, I've never heard of that.
So think of them as distress signals that are released by our own cells when they're damaged or dying.
Got it.
It's like a burglar alarm going off,
Okay.
alerting the immune system to trouble. So the report suggests that even though mirror bacteria might not directly trigger those usual alarm bells,
Yeah.
they could still cause enough cellular damage to release damps.
So even though they're not directly setting off the alarm bells, they're
Right.
still causing a ruckus.
Exactly.
And that ruckus is enough to trigger a massive inflammatory response,
So it's sick.
leading to sepsis.
Yeah, potentially.
So this damp-mediated sepsis, it could be particularly dangerous because it's more generalized.
Yeah, it's harder to control.
Okay, I'm starting to see how insidious these mirror bacteria could really be.
Yeah.
But even if we somehow manage to avoid sepsis, the report suggests that they could still wreak havoc in other ways.
Oh, yeah, for sure. The report highlights the potential for mirror bacteria to cause chronic inflammation, even if they don't trigger a full-blown sepsis response.
So it's like a slow-burning fire, quietly eroding our health over time.
That's a good analogy.
And there are other possibilities too, right? Like mirror bacteria could deplete essential nutrients
Yeah.
or produce harmful metabolic byproducts
Yeah, that's possible.
that could disrupt our biological machinery.
Even if they're not directly attacking us, they could still be messing things up.
Yeah, it's really unsettling to think that something so different from us
I know, right?
could have such a profound impact on our health.
Absolutely.
And to add to that, the report doesn't just focus on the threats to humans.
Right.
It also explores the potential risks to animals.
Yeah, and that's where things get even more complicated.
So we're not just talking about a human-specific threat.
No,
We're talking about a potential pandemic that could affect...
the entire animal kingdom.
Yeah, wow.
It's a bit scary to think about.
So many bacterial pathogens can infect a variety of hosts as it is.
Yeah.
And with mirror bacteria's ability to evade our immune defenses.
Could be really bad.
Yeah. Were there any examples that stand out to you as particularly concerning?
Well, the example of mirror bacteria potentially being fatal to fruit flies, I think that's particularly striking.
Why is that?
Because fruit flies rely heavily on recognizing peptidoglycan to activate their immune response. But with mirror bacteria, that peptidoglycan would be flipped, essentially rendering their immune system blind.
So even a mirror bacterium without any malicious intent
Yeah.
could potentially wipe out an entire fruit fly population.
It's a possibility based on the research, yeah.
And this scenario could also play out in other insects, right?
Right, and that could have devastating ecological consequences because,
Yeah,
insects play such a vital role.
in so many things.
Pollination, decomposition, food webs, it's crazy to think about.
So it's like a domino effect,
Right.
with the mirror bacteria potentially toppling ecosystems from the bottom up.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
And on top of that, the report also mentions that animals could act as vectors,
Yeah.
spreading mirror bacteria to new environments
Wow.
and potentially infecting other species. That adds another layer of complexity to this whole thing.
It does. This is a lot to process.
Yeah, it is.
But are plants also at risk from these mirror bacteria? They do have their own immune systems, right?
They do, but the report suggests that plants are not immune to the potential threat of mirror bacteria either.
So let's talk about that a little bit. How would mirror bacteria interact with plants, and what would the consequences be?
So plant immune systems, like our own, they rely on recognizing specific molecules to trigger a defense response.
Oh, okay.
And these molecules, they're often found in bacterial cell walls or other structure,
Uh-huh.
and they act as red flags
Yeah,
to alert the plant.
got it.
But with mirror bacteria, these red flags would be flipped, so they wouldn't be recognized.
So they're essentially wearing a disguise
Yeah, exactly.
that allows them to slip past the plant's defenses unnoticed.
That's right. And without that initial detection, the plant's defenses might not be activated at all.
So how would these mirror bacteria infiltrate a plant? Do they have any tools or strategies for getting past those tough outer layers?
The report explores a few potential pathways. One possibility is through wounds or natural openings,
Oh,
with
okay.
the tiny pores on leaves that regulate gas exchange.
Like sneaking in through a crack in the wall.
Exactly. And once inside, the mirror bacteria could colonize the plant's internal tissues,
Yeah.
disrupt its normal functions, and cause disease.
So could a mirror E. coli actually infect a plant?
It's definitely possible. While E. coli is mostly associated with animals, it's a versatile bacterium.
Yeah.
It can survive in a lot of different environments.
And if it could gain access to a plant's internal tissues, it could thrive there, especially if the plant's immune system can't recognize it as a threat.
Right. The report specifically mentions the apoplast, which is the space between plant cells,
Oh, yeah.
as a potential haven for mirror bacteria.
Why is that?
Well, it contains nutrients and water,
Right.
and the plant's immune surveillance in that area might not be as strong.
Got it.
It could be a good place for them to establish a foothold.
So what would be the consequences of a mirror bacterial infection in a plant? Would it just cause wilting or could it be more serious?
The report outlines a range of potential impacts, from direct damage to plant tissues,
Right.
leading to things like wilting or necrosis,
Yeah.
to more subtle disruptions of physiological processes like nutrient uptake or water transport.
What about photosynthesis?
Yeah, even photosynthesis could be disrupted.
Wow, that's serious because that's the fundamental process by which plants convert sunlight into energy.
Right, it's essential for their survival.
Yeah.
And without it,
Yeah.
it can have pretty serious consequences.
And the report even raises the possibility of mirror bacteria triggering an overreaction of the plant's immune system.
Yeah, sort of like sepsis in animals.
So it's like the plant's own defenses
Yeah.
are causing more harm than good.
Exactly. That's a possibility.
And the potential consequences for agriculture are huge.
Huge, yeah.
Imagine a mirror bacterial blight wiping out entire crops.
I want to think about it.
Food shortages, economic instability.
Social unrest, it would be really bad.
Okay, I'm starting to grasp the magnitude of this threat. Mirror bacteria could disrupt ecosystems on multiple levels,
Yeah.
from individual organisms to entire populations.
From the ground up.
So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about potential countermeasures.
Okay.
Are there any strategies that scientists are considering to control these mirror microbes?
The report actually dedicates a good chunk of it to discussing potential countermeasures,
Okay, that's good.
both in controlled lab settings
Yeah,
and in the event of an environmental release.
that's reassuring.
Yeah.
So what are some of the approaches that scientists are exploring?
Well, it's kind of like a multi-pronged strategy, combining preventative measures with active interventions.
Okay, so kind of like a fortress with both high walls
Right.
and a well-trained army standing ready inside.
Yeah, exactly.
So what kind of preventative measures are they talking about?
Well, a lot of the emphasis is on robust biosafety protocols in the labs,
Yeah,
where mirror bacteria would be created and studied.
makes
So things like strict containment procedures, rigorous training for
I'm great.
researchers.
Yeah, and thorough risk assessments.
Exactly. Those are all essential to make sure nothing goes wrong.
Those sound like standard procedures for handling dangerous materials.
Yeah.
Are there any specific biocontainment strategies that are tailored for mirror bacteria?
One interesting idea is to engineer the bacteria to be auxotrophic.
Oxotrophic, now what does that mean?
That means they can't produce certain essential nutrients on their own.
Oh,
So they're like picky eaters who can only survive on a specialized diet that they can only get in the lab.
so if they escape, they basically starve to death
Pretty much, yeah.
because they can't find their special food in the environment.
Right, exactly. It's a pretty clever way to limit their survival outside of a controlled environment.
And the report suggests engineering multiple layers of biocontainment.
Oh, yeah, multiple layers.
So it's even more difficult for them to escape.
Right, like a backup generator for your backup generator.
Exactly. But even with all these precautions, what if something goes wrong? Accidents do happen, right? What active interventions are they considering if mirror bacteria escape into the environment?
So the report explores a range of strategies for that scenario, each with its own pros and cons.
Okay.
One idea is to try and modify the environment to make it less hospitable for mirror bacteria.
So it's like changing the playing field
Yeah,
to give the home team an advantage.
yeah, exactly.
But how do we even go about modifying the environment on a large scale? Wouldn't those changes also impact the natural bacteria and mess up the ecosystem?
It's a balancing act, that's for sure. The report suggests things like adjusting nutrient availability or pH levels or temperature, but you're right, any large-scale changes would need to be very carefully considered.
So it's like trying to eradicate a weed without harming the flowers?
Yeah, you need a precise approach.
Yeah. And another idea is introducing competing natural bacteria.
Right, it's like fighting fire, but with microbes.
But wouldn't those introduced bacteria become invasive themselves and cause their own problems?
Potentially, yeah. The report emphasizes the need for careful selection of those bacteria, ideally ones that are native to the environment and wouldn't pose a threat to other species.
So it's all about choosing the right allies in this microbial battle.
Right.
And they also mention using mirror phages, those specialized viruses that could target and eliminate mirror bacteria.
Those are promising.
But are there downsides?
Well, creating and producing large quantities of them isn't easy.
Yeah, it's not like we can just grow them in a petri dish, right?
Right, exactly.
And there's also the risk of mirror bacteria evolving resistance to those mirror phages, right?
That's a possibility too. It's a constant arms race.
So it's like a microscopic chess match with each move leading to new challenges.
Yeah.
So what's the bottom line here? Is there a single solution for controlling mirror or is it going to require a more multifaceted approach?
The report seems to lean towards a combination of strategies being the most effective. It's like having a diverse toolbox and using the right tool for the right situation.
So what you're saying is we need to be prepared for anything, right?
Yes, absolutely. We need to continue the research, refine those countermeasures, and develop new ones.
This whole conversation's really made me think about the big picture, the philosophical implications of mirror bacteria.
Yeah.
It's not just about the risks and countermeasures, it's also about what this tells us about the potential for life in the universe.
Right. It really challenges our assumptions about life as we know it. The idea that we could create this mere biosphere in the lab is pretty wild.
It's like discovering a secret passage into a parallel universe where everything's reversed.
Yeah.
And the report even touches on some potential benefits of mirror life, right?
It does. It explores the possibility of using mirror bacteria in very controlled settings for things like producing novel materials or breaking down pollutants.
So it's not all doom and gloom. There could be a silver lining.
Right. There's potential for good as well as bad.
But the ethical implications of creating and studying mirror bacteria are significant, right?
Oh, absolutely. The report emphasizes the need for a lot of discussion about the risks and benefits of this research involving scientists, policymakers, ethicists, and the public.
This is something we need to discuss as a global community.
For sure.
And there's also the potential for these mirror bacteria to be weaponized, which is really scary.
Unfortunately, that's a real possibility, and the report highlights the need for international cooperation and strong regulations to prevent that from happening.
Well, we've covered so much today. From the science of creating mirror bacteria to the potential risks they pose to humans, animals, plants, and even the environment. We've also talked about potential countermeasures and delved into some of the ethical and philosophical implications of this research. What are your final thoughts? What's the most important takeaway for our listeners?
I think the biggest takeaway is that mirror bacteria would be a truly unique form of life that could completely change our understanding of biology and immunity. It's a reminder that we need to approach these kinds of scientific advancements with both a sense of wonder and a lot of caution.
Absolutely. And the report's emphasis on responsible innovation is really important. We need to have those open and honest conversations about the ethical implications, the potential benefits, and the safeguards we need to put in place.
We need to make sure this research is beneficial for humanity in the long run.
And maybe the most mind-blowing idea from the report is that mirror life might already exist somewhere out there in the universe.
It's a possibility.
If that's true, what does that mean for our understanding of life's origins? That's a question worth thinking about.
For sure.
Well, thank you for joining us on this incredible journey into the world of mirror bacteria. Keep exploring, stay curious, and keep those questions coming.
Thanks for having me. It was fun.